Remember Linda's husband's advice about the microphones, board members. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. At this time, the Committee of the Whole is in session, and we'll open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please notice there'll be another voice coming from this direction. Off to my left is Dr. Madeline Gibbs, our next superintendent. So we welcome her as we rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, is there any public comment? Is there any citizens who wish to speak to the board this evening? Oh, did we? Yes, I'm sorry. I got distracted. Any citizens wish to be heard? Well, representatives of the Wiley Charter School are here to speak to us tonight, and since they're members of the public, and to give them a chance to be, well, I thought I asked as bad as I am. So we'll allow the Ben Wiley Charter School people to address the board as they wish at this time.
Good evening. Welcome to Erie. I'm happy to see you. Members of the board, first I want to begin by introducing our board members that are here with me. That is Mr. Ed Dawson, Ms. Pam Forsythe, and Joe Cintron, who is the Director of Operations. I want to begin by, because you're new to Erie, welcome, Dr. Gibbs. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm on this side with Robert Benjamin Wiley Community Charter School, but I was on that side for 27 years. I worked in Erie School District. And because I had about 3 years left before I retire, I wanted to work at Ben Wiley School because he was my mentor. So I wanted to pour into kids the way he poured into me. I think it's a blessing and an opportunity that I was able to do that. I want to begin with telling you a little bit about the Robert Benjamin Wiley Community Charter School. We've been in existence for 27 years. When they started the charter, or the Erie School District approved the charter, it was a mutual agreement, a mutual understanding that we would work along with Erie School District to collaboratively do what's best for kids. And I'm hoping that we can continue, because you know how you have that cousin that you don't acknowledge, but they still your cousin? So I feel like I'm part of Erie School District. I'm your cousin. I don't feel like we got the same love, but I'm hoping we do. I'm gonna keep hope alive, and I'm gonna keep coming in front of you until we do. Family, we still family, okay? So we want to have a collaborative, talking about the cap increase, a mutual agreement. Before I came to RB Wiley, the charter schools agreed to a cap because it was a mutual understanding that we would collaborate and talk about it and make a decision together on whether you would agree to our cap or not. But telling you more about our school, we're 96% economically disadvantaged, 13% special education, 6% homeless, 50% of our students are Black, 20% Hispanic, 12% white. We have about 50-50 male and female. 90% of our students were in the poverty area of Erie. If you know where Edison is, I'm across the street from Edison. We have 2 locations. One of our buildings is a K-5, and the other building is 6 through 8 middle school. Our kids, when they graduate, most of our 8th grade kids leave RB Wiley and have been accepted to Collegiate Academy, which we're very proud of. Some of them, the majority of them have been accepted to Collegiate Academy, some accepted to Prep, and some accepted to Mercyhurst Prep. So our kids mostly come back to you. Since I've been at RB Wiley, our cap has been denied. And so I'm back here to respectfully request that you agree to a cap. Okay, so in 2020, 2021, you agreed to it. That's before I came to RB Wiley. 21, 22, before I came to RB Wiley, you agreed to it again, right? I came in September of 2021, and since I've been here, it's been denied. My family is denying me, so I'm trying to see the rationale and reason behind it. Now, I know it's not that you don't like charters, because when I worked as the Associate Dean at Collegiate Academy, we had charter seats. So I know you like charters. And then the last meeting that I was at, you approved and spoke very passionately about Montessori, which I'm very proud of because I work with them and love Montessori. I like all the kids in the city, so that can't be the reason why. And I also know that for finance reasons, legally, it can't be a denial legally for finance reasons. So if you look at the paper that I handed out for the board members, if you look at the letter from McDonald Illick, our attorney put a letter together that states the same thing that I just said, that we have been denied. What we're asking for is 100 more students. And you've been granting 25 a year. With 100 more, we're still asking for 25 at a time, right? We're not asking for all 100 right now. It's 25 at a time. So I know that it can't be for score reasons, because if you look at our building level score on the second page, I highlighted all of the schools that our scores were better than, right? I'm pretty proud that our scores are better than the majority of schools in Erie. So I know that being a charter, we have to have better scores, right? We have to do a better job with less money, because per pupil, you get to keep some administrative fees, which is understandable. I'm not even here to complain about that. I'm just here to talk about why. What's the rationale? If you look at the second sheet of paper that I gave you, this one, the enrollment cap paper, that one. If you look at that one, it states in the middle of the first paragraph, the provision was drafted during the financial crisis when it was recognized that students were leaving the district due to the impact of the crisis. So you agreed to a cap increase because you were in a financial crisis. And you're saying that's the reason that you agreed to a cap increase before that. Now that you're not in a financial crisis, you're saying that the board members, after recent discussions with the board, it appears that the sentiment has changed and that there is a limited to no desire to permit a enrollment cap increase. So you're telling me that the board don't have any desire whatsoever to agree to it. It's not a conversation. It's not a reason why. It's just that the board members don't have an interest in increasing the cap at all. And so if you look at the next paragraph, the amendment recites that the current charter enrollment cap for all brick and mortar charter schools provides that its express intent is so the board is not to increase charter school enrollment, and provides that except for a 2/3 of a vote. So not only did you say, absolutely not, we don't have any intent whatsoever, you also say that we not only need to have a majority vote, for the cap, you have to have a supermajority. Instead of having 5, you got to have 6, right? So the reason that we're given is just because we don't have no intent to do it. We don't want to. We can't do it for financial reasons. And not only do a majority vote, you got to have a supermajority. And so as a family working collaborative together, we're also trying to have a meeting where we can sit down with your leadership team and your board so we can discuss it privately, to have a conversation. But we're only permitted to come here for 10 minutes to speak in front of everybody. If you turn to the second page, you see, because I was speaking to somebody and I said to that person, you need not only a majority, but you need a majority plus one more for the cap. And I was told, no, that's not what that means. But if you look at the second sheet, that's exactly what that means. And if you look at our scores, it would indicate that what would be the reason that we can't have a cap increase. We need it because we have to grow. And we want to be, Montessori has 650 as their cap. Perseus House, 615 is their cap. Our school is 550. And so we're trying to say, at least can we have 650, the same as Montessori. And the first time I came, I assumed that Montessori, the majority of their kids was from Mill Creek, but 80% of their kids are from Erie. But they could still go to 650. And so if you look at the scores, I'm just not understanding other than we have the power and we don't want to. Do we have a waiting list? Absolutely. Our kindergarten waiting list, we have 65 students. First grade, we have 31 on the waiting list. Second grade, 23 on the waiting list. Okay. Third grade, 23. 24 in fourth grade, 15 in fifth grade, 34 in sixth grade, 21 in 7th grade, and 10 in 8th grade. So we have a huge waiting list, and I do not think that parents are not coming because you are in a financial crisis. The beautiful thing about working with Erie, I'm gonna give a positive note here. The beautiful thing is having a charter for people that don't have a lot of money. It's a choice. They have a choice to go to another school other than the city of Erie. People with money can go to a private school, but poor people don't have a choice. But because we have this charter, they do have a choice. So kudos to you for approving our charter so that they can have a choice. I just don't understand, and I would love to have a conversation, and I love coffee. If we can sit down and have some coffee, get a latte and talk about it, if our scores are good and we have a waiting list and the other charter schools have a lot more than we have, what's the rationale other than we don't want to? So thank you for hearing me. And does anyone have any questions? And I look forward to talking to all of you and having coffee with you. And please come visit our school. Dr. Gibbs, I would love for you to take a tour. Not only her, all the board members, you're welcome to come and take a tour. I would love for you to see what we do, because you remember when I worked in Erie, it's the same now. We are the happy place where dreams come true. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Are there any other citizens that wish to speak? Okay, next up is Special Education Plan with Dr. Angela Konecki.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for giving me a few minutes tonight to talk to you about our special education plan for the 2025 through 2028 school year. The plan has been posted for 28-day public review. I believe the superintendent has provided the board members with a PDF of the plan as well, the 215-page plan. We used to say we killed trees in special education. Now I guess we kill RAM drive, as I'm sure our IT department can attest to. Next slide. Dawn is going to run this for me because I don't have a good history with the clicker, so he's going to take care of that for me. So our presentation outline tonight will follow these points. We'll review the state requirement for the special education plan, the framework of the plan, some special education data, some compliance monitoring points, and professional development activities. Okay, Dawn, next. So the framework of the special education plan consists of some performance indicators that we are monitored on by the state, some processes and procedures regarding what we do and how we do it. And last is personnel profile, which includes teacher positions and caseloads to ensure that we're following regulatory compliance around that. Okay, next, thanks. So why do we do this? Well, we do this because we have to, because under the PA code, we have to do this. But it's also an opportunity for us to ensure that we are following a cycle of continuous improvement, that we're planning, we're assessing our plan, and then we're adjusting course based on our outcomes. Okay, Dawn, next. Next in the plan are the profile and plan essentials, and this is some data, some special education data. This shouldn't come as any surprise to you because we've discussed this in the past. We have right now about 2,500 special education students in our district. That data is of December 1st. And our school district total enrollment was 10,569 at that time, which makes our percentage of students receiving special education 23.7%. So it's significant. Okay, next. Yeah. Our steering committee consisted of membership and representation from the Erie School Board. Ms. Samatangelo, thank you for that. Community agencies, some of our teachers, our building and central office administrators. We had representation from advocates in the area and also parents membership. So the areas of improvement and the planning that we need to do around them, again, these shouldn't come as surprises to you because we've discussed these things in the past. We continue to make progress around our graduation and dropout rates, but we are not yet meeting state targets. We are the LEA. When it says LEA rate, that's us. Our rate is 79.7%, which is up from 76.6% previously, but the state target is 85.9%. And our dropout rate is 20%, which is down from 22.8%. The state target is 12%. However, I do want to point out to you that when we talk about dropout rate, we're not just talking about kids that don't finish high school. That refers to kids in grades 7 to 12 who leave the district, and we really just haven't been made aware as to whether or not they've enrolled elsewhere. So that's what those numbers refer to. Another area that we're monitored on is educational environments. So there are actually 3 areas that the state monitors us on. And in 2 of those 3 areas, we're actually performing better than the state. But in this particular area, special education inside the regular class, less than 40% of the time, our rate is 16.9, where the state's is 10.3. So in this case, more is not better. The state wants to see us have lower numbers. Oh, sorry, Dawn, you're a little bit ahead of me. Yeah. The state wants us to see lower numbers there because this means we have fewer students educated with their typical peers than the state does. Okay. You can move on to the next slide. Another area is our post-school outcomes. So you see on the left there are the indicators that the state looks at, which are students who are enrolled in higher education within 1 year of leaving high school, students who are enrolled in higher education or competitively employed within 1 year of leaving high school, and then finally, students who are enrolled in higher education, post-secondary ed, or training programs, or employed within 1 year of leaving high school. And you'll see that the state rates are higher than ours. However, I want to point out that these are not necessarily reflective of our actual numbers, but more or less poor survey return from our families after our students leave us. So one idea generated by our steering committee was for us to collaborate with the Safe Harbor case managers in our schools because they often maintain communication and access to the families who still have children in our schools. So they've agreed to help us with this. So we're hoping to see better results next time. Next, Dawn, thanks. And then professional development that we're going to implement around the areas of deficiency that we have for both our regular and special education staff include research-based high leverage practices, co-teaching, and differentiated instruction. So we want to provide professional learning in those areas to our teachers, our parents, and our administrators too, with the goal of improving our student outcomes. And voila. And that's it. I was very brief, even though the plan was 215 pages long. Do you have any questions for me?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
So what accounts for our lower in-class rates? That seems like something you could easily adjust. It's a matter of putting more students in a class, right? But how does that work?
Yeah, yes and no. So technically, that is supposed to be an IEP team decision. However, the state and federal government have targets around that. So we might make decisions that, well, we really think this child needs to be educated in a smaller classroom setting, maybe a learning support classroom as opposed to a general education classroom. And I just think that we need to better prepare our staff around co-teaching models so that we're more effectively using our resources and that we're able to educate our students more effectively in the general ed setting.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I figured. But I mean, it's good to hear that you're really thinking about the best interests of the student, not just hitting a target for the state. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Last year, I think we added about $3 million to the budget for the middle managers.
Yeah. We're interviewing on Friday, so we're working on that.
Oh, they haven't been placed yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
How are we doing on the IEPs? Are we still at a deficit on that, or?
What do you mean a deficit? I'm not sure I understand.
One of the reasons we approved that budget increase was because we were behind on the educational plans for the students.
Behind, you mean that we were not
We
meeting our
were-
deadlines?
Ours were not up to date, yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Harkins,
Yes.
may I address a couple of
Yes.
those points?
Yes, Teresa.
The reason, I just want to make sure, Mr. Nichols, that everybody understands the reason that we're behind is with the hiring is because we're short special education teachers and folks who have that certification. So we're a little bit behind getting those folks into those positions. We are working with the current special education supervisors to review all of those IEPs, but it's going much slower than we anticipated it.
So you've spent very little of that money that was allocated last year?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't understand your question. I wasn't sure what you meant.
And then you indicate we have approximately 24% of our students are in special education. Is that fairly constant among the schools, or is there a wide range between the different schools?
Well,
as
there's
to,
going to be some discrepancy because we don't offer a full continuum of services in all of our schools. You know, and I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, when we made those decisions, a lot of it was made around space. You know, so especially when we closed some of our schools, you know, we put programs where we had room.
At one time, Perry had a concentration of programs, I think. Is that
They do,
still the
they still
case?
have emotional support.
Okay.
Yeah, but programs like Deal and Edison don't have the room, so they don't have any specialized programs. However, that might change, you know, once the new Edison building is, you know, is up and running. We might be putting some specialized programs there, but yeah, we definitely do not have, you know, a full continuum of services in every building.
Mr. Harkins,
Yes,
may I
Brian.
address it? Another item I want to point out with those classes, that's one of the priorities we're looking at. We're not ready to make a recommendation to the whole school board yet, but we looked at that because we have some issues with students being transported long distances because not all of our schools have those self-contained classes. So we're looking at setting up regions, east, west, and central, and moving over time to make sure that we have a representation of each type of special ed program within range of all of our elementary schools and the middle schools. That's just going to take a little time. Again, right now, staffing is our biggest concern. You know, we have the need for the assistant special ed supervisors, but as Teresa said, when we post those, that the people that apply for those are our special ed teachers. And right now, we want to make sure that we have enough special ed teachers before we start shifting more staff into administration. And the same with these additional classrooms. Again, it's going to take a little time to backfill some of those positions and make sure we have enough to start expanding.
Anything else? All right, well, if you think of anything, I'll be back next week to talk to you about autism supports and services. Today is Worldwide Autism Awareness Day, and this April is Autism Awareness Month. So I'll be back next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
you.
Konecki. Next area of discussion is finance and operations, the 25-26 budget. Mr. Polito.
Thank you, Mr. Harkins. So this is actually my 26th or 27th and final budget presentation of my career, and I'm happy to present this tonight. Very, very pleased and happy to have Brian and his team on board. Thank you for your patience and the delay in getting things in place. Brian really hit the ground running last year, but walked into an accounting system that was not transitioned over right and some other issues. So he's been playing catch up the entire year and is getting to the point where he is caught up. But we had a little bit of delay to get these final budget numbers to you. There's a few things we'll point out tonight that we need to adjust that we caught today, but we'll continue to make those adjustments throughout the budget process. This is the first run at the budget. You don't have to vote on the preliminary budget until next month, and the final budget is in June. So we're going to walk through an overview of where the budget is right now. We're going to talk about this month some of the budget initiatives that have come up over the last year. We have some price tags for that, and then talk about next steps. So as we always do, we're going to start out with this year, the 2024-25 school year. This is a summary showing the budget and the actual. And if you recall, last year we adopted a budget before the state passed their budget, and we did get some additional state funding that we did not have in the budget. And again, if you recall, in the fall, one of the big initiatives that we decided to focus on was teacher retention, and we did negotiate a 10% increase with the teachers to bring our salaries more in line with the surrounding school districts. So those are some of the variances that you will see in the budget to estimate for this year. You can see by this summary that with all of that, we're still projecting almost an $11 million surplus this year, which is great. You can see our fund balance is starting to move up there. And I'm going to go to the next slide, and Brian's going to talk through some of the variances.
Good evening. For the major revenue increases between the original budget and the actual, where we estimate the year will end, pilot taxes were a little bit higher because we did receive some late payments from a previous year. The basic ed and ready to learn subsidies, as Brian mentioned, we didn't budget the full amount for the ready to learn that we ended up receiving, to the tune of approximately $11 million, give or take. And there was a slight increase in the basic ed subsidy that was a little bit higher than what we budgeted for. And finally, there is federal stimulus money that I think I wasn't here for that, how we budgeted that, but we did end up receiving about $3 million more in that now ended federal stimulus money than we had planned.
And that's a function of when we spend it. We book the revenue when we spend those funds. So we accelerated some of our projects that we had in place for the federal stimulus funds this year.
So when we're looking at major expense variances, we have salaries increased by about $900,000. That's based on the present staffing levels. Purchase professional services. Most of that was because we had extra contracts that we were able to take advantage of with that ESSER funds, the extra federal stimulus. The transportation is from additional needs with Solvet to provide transportation. That was about $530,000. Building renovations are normally in the CAP fund, but again, because of some of that federal stimulus, we were tracking it in the general fund, and a lot of that was building renovations. As Brian mentioned, we accelerated some of that spending, so that's why there's such a large variance. And the final amount is the $9.5 million in fund transfers. This is the net increase from the fund balance last year. We haven't executed that transfer yet.
And historically, what we've been doing is transferring our surpluses into capital projects. If you recall, we did a presentation in the fall after we received the additional funding to show that if we continue to do that, it will help keep our tax increases for the next round of bond issues in a more reasonable level moving forward. And again, our goal is to always keep that tax increase at the cost of living rate. And this is our preliminary budget summary for the 2025-2026 year. And we have a comparison to the 24-25 estimate that we just went over. You can see across the board with the revenues and expenses, there is a decrease from the previous year. The vast majority of that has to do with the stimulus funds being depleted and us moving back down to a normal spending level for this budget year. Bottom line, this does not have a tax increase yet. We wait until we go through the projections next month with Ian from Public Financial Management. But we're in a pretty good place right now. You can see where we're at right now without any initiatives and without any transfer to capital projects, no tax increase, a surplus of $16.7 million.
And just a few notes on the variances from the budget. There was a basic ed conservative estimate. Typically, some of our subsidies, we estimate a conservative 2% increase because we don't know exactly where the state is going to land. This 1.5 is the more conservative. The state actually proposed a lower rate, so we used the more conservative rate. The decreases in revenue that we have in the budget for next year, because we did receive those extra payments this year, the 25 estimate was a little bit higher than the budget. But the 26 budget is based exclusively on the existing pilots. And then the federal stimulus money is that those funds that we've been discussing previously that are no longer available. So we have, you'll see in a moment that we've decreased our expenses as well. But that federal stimulus money is ending after this year. Looking at those expenses. Second while I get. Okay. So salaries, we will see an increase of about $3.5 million in this version. Much of this is a combination of a cost of living increase and based on our present funding levels, I believe. Is that right?
It's based on the salary increases built into the collective bargaining.
Yes.
Contracts, yes.
Thank you.
Roughly,
And
which is roughly 3%.
thank you. We will see about a $2 million increase in medical insurance based on feedback we've received from Highmark, which is our broker, or from Hub, which is our broker. To a small tuition increase of about $600,000 and a charter tuition increase of about $2 million. The budgetary reserve that you see in the expense is only because we have not included the budgetary reserve in the estimate yet for this year, so you'll see that a variance when you compare the two.
And we've had that budgetary reserve in the budget for the last several years for unanticipated expenses. You can see charter tuition again is one of the areas that we see some pretty big increases, and they can be volatile, so we leave that in there just to give us a little room just in case things move in a direction we didn't predict.
And for the expense decreases, a slight decrease in professional services expense. These are the third-party contracts that we have for other services to support what we're doing in the district with our own staff. You'll see there was no budgeted expense related to the capital improvements that were funded by the now expired federal funding. So that was about $5.3 million that we took out that we won't see. And then the fund transfer again is included for illustrative purposes, but it's not in the budget yet. It's you'll see it in the estimate.
I have a question, if I may.
Sure.
So back to this. So everything that is the increases are accommodated in the plan, the proposed plan. Okay. So like tuition, that means it's going to cost us $600,000 more for our 10,000 students in our public schools.
We have this broken out by charter tuition, which is the biggest driver.
No, just the tuition
The
line.
tuition is other schools, there's approved private schools, different schools that our students go to. A lot of
that we
times
still have
around
to pay.
special education.
Okay.
And based on our current year's expenses and projected increases, we do anticipate a $600,000 increase in that line item this year, which is built in the budget, which is
Okay,
why
and
there's a
how
variance.
many, do we have an estimate as to how many students that represents, just roughly?
I don't have that off the top of my head. It's not a big number in the budget, but we can certainly get that for you.
And why such a large increase in the charter tuition?
That's based on what we anticipate the tuition is going to go up this year.
Well, not if the governor has his flat rate, but we'll see what happens. Hopefully that happens, but.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we never want to count on
Right.
that. That's been proposed time and time
Yeah.
again. This is based on the current rates and assuming that we have 30 additional kids leave for charter this upcoming year, which is what our baseline is for budgeting.
So
It's-
if all the students, if all the schools are already at their cap, the only way they'd get 30 more students is like in this, if we raised a cap.
For the brick and mortar.
Yeah.
That's not the case for the cyber charters, which is where we've been seeing a big increase.
Okay.
It's finally this year started to stabilize and level out. This is based on our historical trends.
Right.
You know, hopefully we'll start to see that level out and start to reverse itself.
Okay, so maybe at the end of this presentation or something, we can talk about the cost of student in public schools vice charter schools. Like why there's a big difference, like what it would cost for us to do 25 students.
For, if we added,
Yeah,
if we
yes.
increased
Right.
the cap.
What would that do to our budget? Okay,
And we can include that when we get into the initiatives. I don't have that included.
Okay.
But if we have that discussion and you want us to include that in as initiative that we have Ian map out for the next 5
Right.
years, we can certainly do that. I would recommend that since we have that request on the table
absolutely,
right now.
please, yes.
I have the number. Based on this year's rates for brick and mortar, adding 25 students would be approximately $370,000.
Okay,
And the other thing that's happening with that charter tuition, and Ian will talk about this more next month, but every time we add initiatives, every time we add expenses internally, our charter tuition rate is based on what we spend per student.
Yep.
So whenever we add $100 in additional expenses to our programming in-house, it translate to another $25 basically in charter tuition out the door for the following year, which is something that we'll have to work through with the projections. So, and keep that in mind as we get through
Okay,
these
thank you.
initiatives as well.
I had a question. You mentioned the cyber school. So how do we predict that? Like, say if the kids might not go to charter schools, so how do we account that in our budget? If students don't want to go to Erie School District and they decide the only option if they can't get into the charter school because there's a waiting list. And I know I've talked about this before. Me personally, I think charter, I've mentioned it before, cyber schools actually is more threat to our budget than charter schools because a lot of students are going to the cyber school options. And eventually those kids, because if they don't make it, they're coming back to the district anyways. And
So again, we're back to what we've been budgeting is 30 additional kids leaving for charter, period. That's based on our recent trends. When we were in financial crisis, we were seeing 60 kids a year leave to charters. That's cyber and brick and mortar. One of our initiatives was to get that down to below 30, and we've been successful in doing that. So we've been able to keep that more or less on average at 30 or below for the last 5 years. So that's kind of where we come up with the numbers, Zach, and also why we put a little bit of extra into that budgetary reserve, because things could change very quickly based on what's going on, and we don't want to get caught like we did in the past. That was one of the areas where we had trouble and caused us to go into the financial crisis in the first place.
also, just, I know with the previous presenter, Ms. Johnson, she mentioned as far as like students, like, per pupil, like, can you explain, like, so there's less money going, that's following the kid back if they go to charter school? Like, they have less money than our kids in the district
There's
to provide
certain-
services?
There's certain exclusions from the formula for things that typically are carried as burdens by the school district, for example, transportation.
Transportation.
So the district is responsible for transporting all the charter kids. We have contracts with the charter schools to do that, so they don't get extra money for transportation. Federal funding is another big area where we don't pass those funds along to them because they get their own federal funding. And then the last big area that we don't pass along funding is facilities. So when we do our facilities renovations, that is not an expense that is built into the formula. Those are the major ones. There's a few more. Certainly, if the board's interested, we can send out the actual formula for you to take a look at.
Mr. Polito, if I may, the numbers too on the tuition, so it's known as the PDE 363 calculation is what Mr. Polito is speaking about. The selected expenditure for charter schools in the 24-25 school year coming out of the school district of the city of Erie is $11,500.53 for a regular education student. If it is a special education student, it is $29,209.72 per student. So the numbers that Mr. Brockman gave you were related to regular education students. If there were, no?
Numbers that I gave were based on 25 students at both rates. If we increased it by 25, currently Wiley's population is made up of about 80% regular ed.
You factored that in.
And when we talk about the actual expense going out to charters, that you brought up a good point, Attorney Wachter. The special education rate is it's inflated because we're only allowed to use what percentage for special ed? 18%?
Yeah, they increased it from 16, and let me go back. For the brick and mortars, it is set at the 16%, even though our special ed population is roughly 22%.
Right, so we take our total special ed expenditures and divide it by 16% of our population, when 23% of our population are actually being served. So right out of the chute, that inflates the actual tuition that goes out the door for us. Any other questions before I move on? So let's get into some of the budget initiatives. So we put together a slide for each initiative, and then I'm going to bring it all back together with a summary. But we did this in order of what we're recommending as priorities. And the first one, we've talked about this a couple times, is the blended case managers. We started with case managers. We only had 5 in our original community schools because the United Way was able to obtain a grant from the U.S. Department of Education to fund those. Thanks to the stimulus funds and the additional state funding, we were able to expand that to all of our schools. The grant for the initial 5 is running out at the end of this year. So we feel that the program has been successful. We would like to maintain those 5 and ensure that we have case managers in every one of our schools. And so our number one priority and our first recommendation for this year's budget is to pick that up, which would be a cost of $469,700. Teresa, is there anything you want to add to that?
So I do have data year to date. Total referrals so far this year are 468 through our case management.
Across all schools.
Across all schools. Last year's unduplicated individuals served with families, 319.
I have a question. Does this represent one per school? One case manager per school, or are there multiple?
One case manager per school, and I believe, Mrs. Prater, correct me if I'm wrong, 2 at Erie High.
Ah, thank you.
Can you go back to that?
Certainly.
So on that one, it says current staffing, funded 13. Is that the community school directors? The next line says full service community school.
So we have 18 total, 13 are district funded, 5 are funded by the United Way grant that is expiring. So that's what the full service community school grant is
So we
called.
won't be funding those community school directors,
No, these are case managers.
13 of them.
We're already funding 13. These are not community school directors, these are case managers. They're social workers that work with our students and families to provide supports, especially outside of the district. Any other questions on
But
this?
5 were funded under a United Way grant.
A grant that the United Way
Yes.
obtained from the U.S.
And that's
Department of
gone.
Education.
So that's why we're
yes.
picking that up. That's
Yes.
fine.
Yes.
Thank
The next one is initiative that came to you a couple meetings back, the Farm to School. This one to me is a no-brainer. It's a great program. You saw, I don't have to go into detail on what you saw about the program. The overall cost to maintain the program after that grant expires is under $100,000. You know, we think that's something that should be included.
Wasn't one of the concerns about staff increasing people on a staff, if there is such a thing, having more bodies to replace people like, can't think of her name.
Doreen.
Yeah.
Right, I talked to her about this, and this is maintaining the current staffing plus finding somebody to work part-time in her capacity in a paid position. She feels comfortable with this budget.
Thank you.
The next one is one that we have not brought to you yet, and it's an expansion of the Blue Coats. Their contract is actually expiring this year. We typically do a 5-year contract with the Blue Coats. So they came to us with a proposal to increase the number of Blue Coats and expand it to all of our schools. Neil worked with the building principals and Sherry to make sure that this was a good proposal, and so we are here tonight asking you to consider this one as well. Neil?
Sorry.
Brian, I'm sorry. Are we looking at changing the name of the Blue Coats?
Their
That's-
actual organization is called Creative Community Connectors. They're formally, like, that's their legal name, but we just call them the Blue Coats. Yeah, so the, part of the reason for the expansion, many of our schools, well, some of our elementary schools don't have these individuals there. And in talking with the buildings as well as with the Blue Coats and student services, we feel that this is a need that we have, that we need to try to get to these students, get to the students when they're at a younger age, so that we can start building and fostering those relationships with them, so that as they grow older, when they are in middle school and when they are in high school, they are making the appropriate choices, which will lead to, you know, better community overall for everybody.
Going to 42 from 27, which is an increase of 15, it's only 300,000, so that's 20,000 a person, so these are part-time positions.
Correct. The way that the Blue Coats work, on average, one Blue Coat will work about 4 hours per day. The Blue Coats will work with student services and the individual buildings to find out when they need that kind of coverage. There are certain buildings that say, I need somebody at the morning and the afternoon for arrival and dismissal. Some of them request, I need people in the cafeteria to help where kids are together. So the average is 4 hours a day for each of those individuals.
And the next.
So I have a question. So
Sure.
I know a lot of them also serve as crossing guards. So, but that's a separate line item,
Yes.
correct? Okay,
Yeah, and we have a full complement? Yes, we do. Okay,
excellent.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Any questions on Blue Coats before I move on?
Question. I'm just excited to see this in here because I can't say enough nice things about the Blue Coats and having the opportunity to work with them during the day. So I'm just glad to see this as an initiative expanding.
Two. The next initiative is near and dear to Mr. Nichols' heart, I know, is the expansion of pre-K. We've talked about this multiple times over the years. We're not sure that we can go full in offering universal pre-K to every family that wants them. We're not sure that we can handle that capacity or that there is demand for that, but this is at least a start to expanding the program that we believe we could probably handle. Let Teresa explain.
So currently, we do have 12 classrooms, 2 classrooms being at Lincoln and Joanna Connell. If the board chooses to move forward with this initiative, we would have to investigate a couple of things. We'd have to investigate space, whether we could accommodate to have 2 classrooms in each of our elementary buildings. Staffing may be another challenge for us. We have 1 adult for every 10 students, so that would be one teacher and one teacher aide. The data that we looked at does suggest that our students who attend our pre-K classrooms, on average, there's a lot of variables, but it does suggest that there are less of those students in our below basic range as they move through our system, and a little bit of an increase in proficient advanced areas.
Do we have a read on how successful our in-house program is as opposed to some of these outside programs?
We just have the numbers of our students who are in our pre-K program versus students that we know didn't come to our program. I don't know how, or if we can get the data from the other agencies. We could look into that.
I mean, we have a problem with these third grade scores. The efficacy of the existing pre-K programs might be part of the problem.
Partially could be, yes, yes,
In
but
other
what,
words, if we could identify where our kids went for pre-K and see if it's being borne out in the test scores.
yeah, we can dig into that a little bit more. We can check with the child.
Would be another reason to expand our program if what's out there isn't working for the kids.
We can check with the child accounting
Because-
department.
At least 2/3 of our children qualify on a means basis for pre-K. Do most of them attend, do you think, or?
Mrs. Ryan, you want to come up to the microphone?
Just because as we're working to get these slots, the spots that we have right now are pre-K counts grant. And it's a competitive grant that we are actually in a continuations part of it. We've requested additional slots. But the issue with the city of Erie is the amount of students that qualify for both pre-K counts and Head Start. The number of slots that we have across the city in our spots and in partner organizations across the city is it doesn't meet anywhere near the amount of children that could take advantage of it. So there's a big deficit, and that's just in pre-K counts. You have to be 300% or below the poverty rate, or to the poverty rate. Head Start is 100% above the poverty rate. And so we're talking, we have some of the poorest zip codes in the state of Pennsylvania in our city. So we have a really big issue with having enough funding in ours and both Head Start for the children that have the need.
Head Start, a pre-K program?
Head Start is, yes. It's different than pre-K counts. It's a different funding source, but we partner with all of the Head Starts and the other pre-K counts in our city so that we're always trying to maximize between us and these other locations that the sites run full. Because we want every kid who qualifies not to be on a waiting list, but to be serviced in one of the spots. So we work really closely with the local pre-K providers.
At the former Roosevelt site, there's a pre-K now, right?
That, yes, CDC.
Head Start.
They have one down on East 10th Street?
Yes, they have many locations and they have both Head Start and pre-K counts.
But that was news to me, that I assumed there were enough slots citywide
No,
for pre-K.
nowhere near. And
so it's
I
less
could get
than
you that
half.
number.
Wow.
It's amazing. It's amazing the need versus what is actually able to be funded is there's a wide divide.
And we can go from 12 to 20, which is a 67% increase for only $1 million? Is that because there's some funding?
No. That would be increase,
what
that
it
would be
costs
8,
us?
it would be 8 teachers and 8 teachers' assistants.
Because we already have this classroom.
The grant.
And that's what,
Yes.
we're having a problem with space in the. in all
And
of
that,
this.
like, one teacher and one teacher assistant, I'm gonna be honest, with the amount of needs that our students have been coming with, We've really, in our pre-K counts classrooms, moved to one teacher, 2 aides, as much as we can find the aides. We're struggling even to fill those positions because we don't want to deny children, right? Based on behaviors that they might come. We want them with us so we can start working and building that foundation. So if that's 1 teacher, 1 aide, we've been really working to have 1 teacher, 2 aides because of the need that we see.
Well, when you say 8 classrooms, you need to have an adult there for every 10 children?
You must
An aide
have
count
1 teacher and 1 aide for 18 kids, yeah.
For 18. And then if you had 2 aides, it's 27?
No, what I'm saying is in most of our classrooms, to run successfully with 18, we are having 1 teacher, 2 aides, because again, as we're looking at students and we're looking at risk factors, we factor in it's socioeconomic and then risk factors. And so, we have some children that need
Brian?
Yeah,
significant
Mr.
support.
Nichols, those limits are based on the state
state.
grant. So if we do this and we fund it 100% through us, we're gonna have some more flexibility to add more students if we feel that the teacher and the aide could handle it. And Karen's laughing at me, and I'm sure Natalie's giving me daggers about even proposing adding positions, but
Brian,
Here we
can I
are.
just say something? Is it possible, I know we do have contracts with, or we work with other early childhood facilities as the director of a daycare that services 6 months to 12 years. Maybe we could sit and reach out and come to some understanding, because I have space in my facility.
And so, yeah, I think,
we could get the
I think
teachers.
it's all of the sources, right? Because children could qualify for childcare credits, which is different when we start working, especially, I'm gonna say the pre-K counts grants. We have to be very particular about the qualifications of the teachers. So the teachers must be certified, the aides must have, certification beyond. So we have to, as we're even partnering it with some childcare agencies to try to give our CTE students and just general students more work experience, some of the issues that we're running into is that the childcare staff may not have the certifications that they need in order for them to be covered under these grants. So that's kind of, the certified teacher piece is a big piece. It's a tricky piece right now.
So I know we all agreed for this to be included, but the challenge again is space. Like everybody, we say space. As we found out, we approved something last year and we didn't fill those positions. And how about getting people hired for those positions? And also because I know the cutoff, could you just clarify the age?
Sure. So for pre-K, what we do in the district, because we only have a certain amount of slots, is 4-year-olds are given priority for those slots because we want to give them that foundation for entering in kindergarten. Once we have recruited as much as we can, we allow 3-year-olds to also apply. 3-year-olds are they're weighted. We wait 4-year-olds get first preference, and then 3-year-olds are able to, they're offered spots in the program if we don't have 4-year-olds that are taking advantage.
So is there because I had an issue with this, is there a cutoff line, when they're waiting for parents who are 4-year-old to apply, and there's parents who have 3-year-old waiting, but waiting on those 4-year-old parents, is there a cutoff line for that?
Our classrooms fill pretty quickly. And so we don't start, and I don't know if it was last year, the year before, we didn't get our grant funding until late. So it pushed everything back even farther. But we really try to give parents the enrollment window and through the summer so that we're making sure that we're able to prioritize kids. And again, as we're recruiting, as the Blue Coats help us recruit, as our community school partners, we really want to give that preference to the 4-year-olds so that they have that foundation. Now, what we always do with the children that are on the list, whether they be 3-year-olds or 4-year-olds that come on the list after, is we try to communicate with the parents where there are open spots and other partners. And, we also work very closely with Head Start so that if we have students that qualify for pre-K counts and Head Start, we try to offer the Head Start parents or the parents whose income is within that Head Start but they have a choice of whether they want to come to us or Head Start. But we try to give them all of the options so we can serve as many kids as possible.
Yeah, I have a question. I was at a school improvement plan meeting at Joanna Connell last week, and I have to admit, I was a little shocked. They had some data on how many kindergartners were below basic on I don't know what they measure in kindergarten, but there was a big deficit of kids coming into kindergarten, which I thought was like playing with bunnies and coloring or something. I'm like, oh my gosh, how is that possible that they're already, do we have any, I don't know how long we've been doing the pre-K, but do we have any indication that the kids that go through that are actually better prepared for kindergarten?
Yes.
And they're doing better?
We do, and yes, and I think when schools are looking at data, right, especially beginning of the year data in kindergarten, as a former kindergarten teacher, kids are coming in kindergarten, they're not supposed to know everything. It's
But they're
our
supposed to know
jobs.
something, or because they're being rated on something.
Well, they have an initial, it's a benchmark assessment, because we
Okay.
want to know how they're performing. The big thing is where are they performing at the middle of the year
Right.
after we've had, that first third of the year to grow them. So, but we do see, I mean, it's research that we see, it's research across the
Right.
country, that
Absolutely.
children that have that early learning
Right.
do come to school, not just with more academics, but the social, emotional learning behaviors,
Right.
because they've been in that situation.
All right, thank you.
Just to go over this arithmetic a little bit, we'll have 20 classes with 18 children in each class, so 360. And a kindergarten class is district-wide is probably around 1,000 students, probably a little higher than that. So maybe 1/3 of the students will have pre-K provided by us. So, I mean, that's a significant percentage. Does that sound right?
As of today, there are 833 kindergartners in our schools.
So this is significant. This is significant.
It is, and I just, again, this is.
You're running out of space with this, right?
And, again, this is something that, the board has been asking about. This is going to be a stretch for us. If the board wants to commit to do this, it's going to be a stretch to find the positions. It's going to be a stretch to expand the programming administratively. And again, this is something that I say to you a lot. We are lean in central office, and we're focused, and we've had a lot of new initiatives over the last couple of years, and it's all depends on where the board wants us to focus our time. Do we want to add more programs this year, or do we want to focus on the programs that we've added in the last couple of years and work on implementing those better? So those are all things that we need to take into consideration, as well as the budget. So when we're getting into this pre-K and the next one, those are the areas where we're starting to have concerns about whether or not we're going to be able to take that on as an administrative team and find the space and find the positions.
But all the money's in the budget.
No.
None of this money's in the budget?
No, these are initiatives that are not in the budget.
Oh, thank you for clarifying.
Right, so these are all things, this is kind of your wish list and our wish list over the last year,
no,
okay?
my wish list
We're not
is
gonna be
all
able to
of
afford all these unless you're willing to do a 5 or 6% tax increase, but I wanted to lay everything out, because we've been asking about these things. Have these discussions, we're gonna go through, I think, one more initiative on library, and then talk through what all these costs are. I'll tell you my gut feeling on what we can afford. We're not gonna know until PFM does their projections. And then I want you to let me know what initiatives you would like us to move forward with to continue to explore, and also have Ian include into the projections for next month. Okay?
If I may quickly, folks, I just want to remind everybody that we have a strategic plan that's coming up. We're going to begin that process in the fall. I think when it comes to some of the smaller items that are perhaps a little bit obvious, right? Surrounding, some of the smaller items that you presented. I think those are fair for us to consider for this budget. I do recommend to my colleagues there that for larger initiatives and larger things that we work through the strategic planning process so that we can get a full scope of what's happening in our schools, get thorough feedback and engagement with community partners, with stakeholders within and outside of the district as well. And I think this having, and thank you, Mr. Polito and your team for doing this. I think having these figures provides us with, sort of additional knowledge as we go into the strategic planning process. So that's just my 2 cents.
Any more questions on pre-K?
Well, just one in general. I thought at the end of the presentation on the budget, we are starting out with a large surplus of 16 million.
I'll show you how that disappears in a couple
Okay.
slides.
That's what I was afraid of.
Thinking
Yeah.
that too.
Be afraid. And the last one is a presentation we had last month. Again, these are initiatives, this one in particular has been on our to-do list for a number of years. Certainly something we need to address, but we had some more pressing matters to deal with as far as getting the curriculum in place, rolling out the student supports. I appreciate the commentary last week. We were able to actually put together a schedule with our existing librarians and aides to actually have library at every one of our schools through the end of the year. So right now we are covering that. And it's not ideal, but it's at least one day a week that we have. This approach again is getting into the realm of we're concerned about whether or not we're going to be able to do it. Just because of capacity and staffing is another one. So this is another area which we think we could do some expansion. We do not have a proposal to add a librarian to every school because they're just not out there. There's no way for us to find those type of positions. So this is a compromise that would work and provide additional coverage, but it's still going to be a stretch. So Teresa, do you want to walk through what you think we could possibly do here? Because Natalie gives me more ideas about
I know,
the
this is the
positions.
time I don't get an elbow. So the staffing that we included here would put, we would have 2 librarians to kind of manage the programming throughout the district. And the LRAs, the Learning Resource Assistants, we added the 11, so that would provide 1 per building. And what this would enable principals to do is schedule in time for students to visit the library, for LRAs to work with the children, read to the children, and have that opportunity more consistently than what we have set up with the current staffing right now.
And the reality of this, we already have a shortage of special ed aides, Natalie, correct?
So yeah, I think we strategically made the decision this year to concentrate on our special education aides. If generally what would happen is if we post these LRA positions, it would take from that group of people and we'd have to backfill those. And so I think we strategically, along with special ed, made the decision that that was the higher priority to make sure those services occurred. And we're still, as we get, and I have a conversation with special ed every week, as we get more and more challenging situations where we need more supports, that's not going down, that's increasing. The need for that is increasing, almost on a weekly basis, the kind of supports that our students need, so.
And this again is something I think we need to have a broader discussion about the use of the libraries. A lot of districts are shifting, they're keeping their libraries, but are adding it for more workspace for students, more collaborative areas. I think, we were initially talking about a committee to start to review that, but as Dr. Brenneman mentioned, you are looking at a strategic plan process, and that may be a better place to have this conversation, just so that we're getting input from, or you're getting input from all the stakeholders before we make any big decisions about that space in all of our schools.
I have a question. So we originally approved like to have LRAs previously, but those positions was not filled, correct?
They've been eliminated over the years, just through budget cuts and not added back.
So currently, what do we have currently? 5 LRA and 2 librarians currently.
Yes,
And so that should be on the budget.
yes. That is in the
addition-
budget.
This is additional.
The 11, yeah, the 11 are the additional that if you wanted to make sure you had a coverage at every single building next year, all the time, the 11 would do that.
These only require a high school degree,
Yes.
So is,
and they pay fairly well, 40,000 a year.
Yes.
so is it the challenge that these positions pay more than teacher assistants?
It's just generally a more desirable position. It's, it's just a very different position. And it's a little easier to fill than some of the special education positions.
I had some suggestions, like I know like the foundation's been doing with, as far as getting people to get their clearances or whatnot. So I mean, I can think of like even, because the last group that came and spoke, actually, as far as like, we're getting a lot of volunteers to do their clinics and whatnot. The foundation did one last week. I think they had about 20 to 25 people. Maybe the foundation can assist as far as even volunteers, going through these clearances or whatnot in their next phase as they have some funding left. And that will probably help with some of the, assisting with the library as some people to volunteer, since we have a hard time getting these positions filled or whatnot.
Can you reiterate what, you said there was a change since we had the meeting, that you're opening them all, but like one day a week or something? Did I misunderstand that? Or,
So Mrs. Ryan put the schedule together with the 2 librarians, so so I don't misspeak, she can address that.
thank you.
Sure. So what we did was, there's some LRAs that are already building based, and I didn't want to blow up their schedules, right? So what we did was I worked with the 2 librarians. There's another LRA that primarily does kind of some managerial things, and then there was an LRA at a school that had time in her schedule. So I worked with them. We tried to honor commitments that they had already mapped out in schools, and then we really tried to get kind of back-to-back days so that it didn't feel like, the people kind of getting herded through the library. And we tried to get a number of rotations. They're not going to get all seen every week. It's just impossible with the amount of students that would be coming through the library. So I tried to keep either the librarian or the aide in the building the whole day so that they weren't having to run between 2 schools to make it, pretty palatable for them. But, we have some big things coming up. We're getting to the point of the year where they have to do inventory and some other things. So we tried, and the librarians had great feedback from me. I created a base schedule. Then we met on Zoom for 2 hours where they, kind of walked me through some different things. And I can't say enough about their willingness and the LRAs, the 2 LRAs that are going to do some traveling. But it's a start.
Oh, I think it's a great start, and I really appreciate that. And I think there were some libraries, like everything's pushed to the one side because they weren't even like set up for kids to actually access anything. So I'm sure there's some reorganization of the basic library itself to make it useful and usable.
When space isn't used specifically for something, it can tend to be a catch-all for certain
Right.
things. But
And you mentioned inventory is coming up. That would be a great place, I would think, to employ volunteers. And I know there are people that want to help out in the schools. So just consider those things of how we can utilize these people that want to be helping out.
Mrs. Graff, we do have to be cautious about that because it is bargaining unit work.
Inventorying books?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay, all right. Enough said. I understand.
But certainly something we continue to explore.
Wow, okay.
April is school library month, by the way. So we're having a discussion. But I mean, we talked about, the importance of library helping students with education, and especially with reading, quiet, safe environment. So hopefully we'll figure something out, because I feel like libraries assist with that, with just the data that was provided at our last meeting.
One other question. Is it hard for the teachers now to find a way to integrate the library into their day when they have a library day?
So the teachers are able to utilize the library.
No, I mean, for them to get the students, how do the students go into the library? Do they go as a class?
Sure.
Or, as individuals, or, how does that work?
Yes, so in schools that have full-time LRAs, it's generally run by class schedule. So they have certain days that they go. The librarians have certain schools that they rotate to because the administrators have asked for that. And they too have schedules with classes coming in. At the middle schools, there tends to be more of, like you're saying, the drop-in where kids are able to go and take out books.
Okay.
That way.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions on library? So this kind of pulls everything together. We start out with the preliminary surplus. The first item I have on the list, I did not have a slide, and that's the capital project transfer that PFM projected when they did our updated projections in September. So if you look, basically that transfer is what they projected our surplus to be for 25-26. When they did this in the fall, you can see that it's very close to what our actual preliminary surplus is for this year. It's a little less. So right now, when you look at that, there's about $1.7 million that we have to work with as is. Meaning that when they did the projection in this fall, what they needed in order to balance the budget in year 5 with tax increases close to 3%, this year showed a $15.1 million surplus. So again, that means that we have some room to work with. And the reason why we have surpluses on the front end is because, again, we're always trying to balance year 5. It's hard to explain without the projections in front of us. But we're always trying to balance year 5, and like every other school district in the state, our expenses are growing faster than our revenue. So we want to stay ahead of that and make sure that we're increasing taxes enough each year that we don't get to year 5, have a $5 million deficit and no way to raise taxes because it's over the Act 1 index. So
Wait, can you back up? The preliminary surplus is what we saw in the budget that you
yes,
presented, right?
Yeah.
This 15 million that's a deficit,
Well, that's so.
but it's in parentheses.
Right. The first thing that we're doing, that I'm recommending we do with this surplus is
I see.
leave it.
Okay.
So that can be
okay,
transferred to capital projects.
Okay,
And
that's an
again,
expected expense.
go in,
Yeah.
and that works into our long-term facilities plan
Okay.
that ensures that we'll have some cash, enough cash on hand that we only borrow enough to increase our debt service payments by $3 million.
Okay, I understand.
Which then again would not increase taxes over 3%.
Right, okay.
So my recommendation is leave that, because to me, our number one priority should be continue to make all of our buildings warm, safe, and dry. So we'll continue with that plan. The next items are all the new initiatives that we would want to consider, case managers, farm to school, Blue Coats, pre-K, and library. I have those in a yellow box because, again, all of those are new expenditures, and those new expenditures will increase our charter tuition in 26, 27, and beyond. So the actual cost of those is about 20% more in that following year, and that'll show up in the projections that Ian puts together next month. So that's why when we look at this and you get to the bottom, you say, well, that deficit isn't too bad. It gets bad the following year because of the charter tuition and because, again, the revenues are not keeping up with expenses. So That continues to grow and balloons to a multi-million-dollar deficit in the last year if we don't. My gut feeling, again, looking at this without the projections, that we could probably handle everything through the blue coats and still maintain those cost of living tax increases. If we're getting into the pre-K and library, you're going to have to consider tax increases over the 3% in order to do those initiatives moving forward.
I'm gonna argue in favor of that. This assumes a 3% increase here. We get to this minus 750, which would be about 1.5 more, roughly.
The 3% works when we maintain a deficit in 25, 26 of $15 million, or maintain a surplus of $15 million.
But when you come to this deficit of 750, that's assuming a 3% increase.
No. There's no increase in there at that point.
Well, then that's only 1.5 there.
Yeah. I want to reserve decision-making until Ian does the projections.
Here's the argument I want to make to everybody here, and I pay the most in school taxes. I want to pay more because we got 16 million permanently last year, right? 14, whatever that extra bonus was, we expect that to continue.
Yes, which we spent the vast majority on teacher raises and reserved a chunk for debt service,
But it was like 14 or 15 million, right?
which we spent most of.
But
Yes.
here's the point I'm trying to make. It's 14 or 15 million. When we increase the real estate taxes, it's peanuts. That's 15 million. 1% on our real estate taxes is about $500,000. So here we got this money from the state somehow with this very Republican Democrat balance down in Harrisburg. Somehow we got this money last year. And it was not given to us for taxpayer relief. It was to improve our system. And if we go and say, okay, we're not gonna have an increase, or we're gonna have a cost of living increase, I don't think we're gonna get more money. We need to show we're spending this money where it's needed. And every one of the ones that the administration puts forward, these are pressing issues for us. So, you know, we're gonna be dealing with this on and on. We've not had a reassessment in town. Our real estate taxes are lower based on our current values in the city. You know, there has not been a reassessment at equalization ratios up to 1.72. Our taxes are going lower and lower. I don't think we should cut out any of this. And I think because we got that money, because we've progressed here, and it wasn't given to us to subsidize our taxpayers, it was given to us to improve the district, and it has improved the district, and we gotta keep spending. That's my point.
And again, I'd like us to hold deliberations until we see the real numbers.
Agreed.
I want to start preparing you because my message is tonight with this is, you're probably not going to like the tax increase for adding all of these in. It's going to be a big number, you know, certainly if the board chooses to go in that direction. We're all in favor of adding programming, Mr. Nichols, so when we can manage it successfully.
Do we have any indication of what we would expect from the state
Yes.
budget this year?
Let's go to the next slide.
Oh, all right.
I just wanted to thank the administration for listening to us and putting all these items on here, because I really think that we were all very passionate about these things. I know Sumner's very passionate about the pre-K. I am too. I was a former pre-K teacher. So I really think that you all listened to us and at least are presenting us with the information. And in a perfect world, I would like to see all of these implemented as well. In a perfect world.
And I think it's a perfect time, especially this fall, to have all of those discussions as you're rolling out your strategic plan. That was very helpful for us last time as, you know, as we started to get additional state funding, we had shovel-ready projects basically there. And these are a couple things I think that if we can't fund or you can't fund this year, need to go in the strategic plan as long-term initiatives so that when you know, when there is money available, you can pull the trigger and get these done. And then my last two slides are really some proceed with caution slides, because I follow what's happening at the state level very closely. It makes me extremely nervous what's happening with their budget. This is the budget projection that the PA Independent Fiscal Office put together, independent of both parties, in November 2024. This is before the governor's current proposal, which adds millions of dollars to education. So this is before any new initiatives. You can see the first highlight. You can see that the 2024-25 year that we are in, they're showing a $3.4 billion deficit, which is projected to balloon to 29-30 to $6.6 billion. That's a huge number. That would require massive sales or earned income tax or personal income tax increases, something that has not happened in 12 or 13 years, and we do have a Republican-controlled Senate. I don't see it happening this year. I don't see it happening in the near future, which means it's going to come to a head sooner rather than later. And if you look at the last two line items, their fund balance at the end of the year, after they have this deficit, is going to be $2.9 million. They moved a lot of their stimulus money into a rainy day fund. That's the $7 billion. That is all based on these projections and not adding any new programming, just existing programming. That keeps existing funding as is. That'll run out in 26, 27, which is a scary thought. It's something that you need to watch very closely as you move ahead. And my parting message as I leave is to proceed with caution as you're thinking about these initiatives, because this reminds me very much of what happened in 2011, 2012. So this is an example of what happened during that time period. This is the basic ed subsidy. It shows a historical trend on the basic ed subsidy. The blue dollars are state money. The red and green dollars are stimulus money they received back then during the housing crisis. They decided to supplant state dollars in the basic ed subsidy formula and also use those monies to increase the basic ed subsidy, and it ballooned between 29-10 and 2010-11, and that money disappeared. At that time, I remember, because I was at Northeast, nobody thought that they would ever cut the state subsidy down. They thought that they would fill that gap, but they were facing a very similar type of circumstance where they had no money and no rainy day fund. They had no choice but to basically scale the basic ed subsidy back to what it was in 28, 29. And you can see there wasn't even an increase for that until 2013, 14. So it was a 5-year stint of basic level funding, and that is the year that the financial crisis here blew up, because they lost the stimulus money. They pulled money back from us at the state level, and we had used our stimulus money to pay for recurring salaries, and the stimulus money ran out. So it was a double whammy. It sparked this decade-long crisis that we're dealing with. And what I'm seeing with this rainy day fund, which is stimulus money, looks very similar to what I'm looking at here from 10 years ago, 10 or 12 years ago. So again, as you're thinking about these initiatives, it's been really good the last several years, really good. We've been able to add a lot of programming and a lot of different things, but I would be very careful about adding until we have more clarity around how they're going to deal with that deficit in the next couple of years.
Do you expect a decrease or elimination of our, like, breakfast, lunch things, and how would that possibly
That's
impact us?
more uncertainty that we're going to have to keep an eye on over the next couple months.
But we would expect to try to fill that gap if possible? I mean, I would assume.
That would be another initiative
yes,
you would have to
yes, I think
consider.
we
So
might-
again, that's
yeah,
why I'm
want
saying
another one on
proceed
there.
with caution.
Right.
One of the scariest things that I've seen coming out of Washington was the idea of repealing that community waiver for free and reduced lunches, which we're allowed to provide free and reduced lunches to all of our students. If they eliminate that,
Right.
we're either charging for lunches for a group of students or picking up that cost ourselves,
Exactly.
which could
Okay.
be very costly. It's
Yes.
something I've been meaning to ask Mr. Brockman to price out, and I haven't had a chance to yet. We'll probably have that for you next month, just to, again, another item you need to
Thank you.
keep in the back of your mind. Any questions on this?
So I know nobody liked the word tax. Isn't that the only way to get ahead? Like, I mean, if you know this is coming, and if you don't, what Mr. Sumner said, if you don't do that, and you're gonna hit people with high tax rate or trying to gap that budget, rather than like slowly address that, because you're saying like it's gonna come. Well, the way you're explaining it, like if we don't, we're gonna be giving people higher tax rates, and this
Or-
room's gonna be filled next time we're here or
Or you're
whatnot.
cutting programming?
Or cutting programs, that's
Yeah.
critical to students.
Yeah.
So I mean,
that's-
what Mr. Sumner is saying, like, I mean, I know it's unfavorable, but to stay on task, like, you know, some people are getting raises because of cost of living adjustment, but we're taking a hit as well too, with all this uncertainty as well.
Yeah, it's, again, I think, once we get some more clarity around where we're going with the projections, I think we can have some of those conversations. But again, as much as I think all these programs and initiatives are important, it's, again, I'd hate to see you expand and then have to pull them back or pull back somewhere else in the next couple of years as well.
Ryan, and I do want to say, when I look at this 2010, 2011, that was the year I was forced into retirement because my
Yes,
job got
yes, it was.
eliminated.
Yeah,
So things happened and a lot of jobs were lost, and I was one of those.
yes, across the state.
Across, yes.
Yes.
So I understand to proceed with caution. At the age of 52, I was without due to the decrease in funding.
We haven't added a whole lot of people here. You funneled a lot of these funds into the buildings.
We have added people, a considerable amount, but we've done it thoughtfully with the additional state funding we've received and kept that cushion for a 5-year period. And I think that's the importance of making sure we have those projections, because, if things start to go south in 1 year, we know at least we're balanced for 5 years. We can start to make adjustments now before it becomes a crisis like it did here in 2010, 11, and we laid off 250 people in 1 year. Yes. So that's why it's always important to keep those 5-year projections in mind when you're making decisions today.
Mr. President or Vice President? You're
Yes, Mr.
today. Yeah, Mr. President. Yeah, just some remarks. I want to say that, I do appreciate the robust dialogue that we've had today. I do want to say that, and I agree quite a bit with Mr. Nichols. I just want to back us up and just note that we're out of the crisis as we know it. But our children in our district is not out of financial crisis entirely, because we have been short, not just the compounded losses that we've had over years and decades, but also the fact that we are over $90 million short of fair funding that our district should have, so that we're not making we shouldn't have to make these sorts of calls, these sorts of decisions. And anytime we talk about what we may have to do on our end regarding tax increases, et cetera, that isn't us, right? That's us doing our jobs. That's the state legislature that's failing to do their jobs, that is pushing us to have to make those decisions. And so anytime there is a tax increase, a school tax increase on homeowners, we have to recognize that that is a state legislator tax increase. It's not one that we're doing just willy-nilly. But, when it comes to, again, there's a lot of uncertainty of what's happening right now in the federal government. And of course, we don't know how that's going to shape up in the state government. And so I do urge us to do as Mr. Nichols said. We should be investing in our students and improving the things in our schools. I do want us to not go too big this year. Let's see how things are shaping up. Let's see what our strategic plan informs us about. For the things that seem like, easier to take on this year, I definitely think we should go for it. And I think we should be very cautious about, any early determinations right now regarding millage increases or holding flat. The way that you presented the finances, and I think, this was a great presentation. I'm open to the idea of holding flat just as much as I am to having it match, as Mr. Sharif said, with, inflation and ensuring that we're not passing on a larger bill later on down the road. So again, I just appreciate all of the discussion. I would like to see, you don't have to do it right now unless somebody has a calculator. I would like to see what the impact of this would be with everything minus the pre-K thing. Not to say and Mr. Nichols, I do believe in the pre-K thing. I just think we should go through the strategic planning process and because it is such a large thing to take on. But I would like to see what it looks like if we were just to, take on those other things this year. But that's all I have. Thanks.
And we'll have Ian here next month. If you want us to make sure we include all the initiatives to start, we can do that. He can set it up so that he can turn off and on any one of those initiatives and drive out a tax increase. So we can have a more of a back and forth next month before we make any decisions on the taxes. So just a reminder, Ian will be here May 7th for a committee of the whole with the projections. We do have to adopt a preliminary budget on May 14th, so that's the first time we're going to have to make some type of decision on a tax increase. That can be changed up and down at any time. We typically like to go in with the 14th higher than the June, because we would rather decrease taxes in the final budget rather than increase them. So just something to keep in mind. We'll have another opportunity to have a robust discussion at the June 11th Committee of the Whole about the budget with final adoption on June 18th, assuming we have a state budget passed in time, which is highly unlikely. So we'll probably be looking at a special board meeting closer to the end of June to adopt our budget. Okay, and then we do have, Brian and I did find a couple adjustments in the budget book, so he's going to get those updated for you. It's more with the 24-25 estimates, not the 25-26 budget. So once he has that, he'll send you out a revised electronic copy. We did not print this out for you. If you would like a paper copy, just email Brian and he'll make sure he gets a copy to the board secretary's office for you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Polito. Okay, next on the list is Board Policy Review Committee. Do we have anything? Okay, and then the Board Governance Committee. Daria's not able to be with us tonight, so unless someone else has something related to that, we'll wait.
Yeah, Mr. President, I do have something, but it's an executive
Go ahead,
session.
Doctor.
It's an executive session for the item, so.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
I should know, I'm sorry, I should actually, I want to thank Ms. Graff for bringing this up. So, I do believe, and I'll work with Ms. Devlin on this, although I might end up, one of us might end up chairing it in her stead if she's unavailable. But, I think we should be looking towards sometime, perhaps early May or sometime in May to discuss, to meet as a governance committee to talk about, the adoption that's coming soon of the new board docs version and, the sharing of files and reports and information that would be available at the fingertips of board members and, working with the board secretary's office and the administration to make sure that we have a process set up so that by the time we start the next school year that we have a good rhythm in place of where we're able to access information and where it's being put at. So I just want to put that on folks' radar. So for those that are on the Board Governance Committee, that I will be speaking with you about arranging a meeting in the coming weeks.
Thank you. The draft of the regular meeting agenda is before you. Is there anything of interest or concern, or any questions, comments on next week's regular board meeting?
Actually, I have a question.
Go ahead, Linda.
That when we got the draft agenda for tonight, there was another item on there that is not on tonight's agenda about the, what is it, Eagle's Nest. So I wondered where that went. Oh, it was in your update of things.
Is it on the agenda?
It's on the agenda.
What item
For,
is
to-
that, Neil?
for, for,
It is on the agenda for consideration.
For
It is-
next-
For next week, it is 7.17.
okay, I just kind of expected some discussion tonight. 7.17, okay.
That's, and Ms. Kraft, that's just a continuation of, the board, and certainly we can have a discussion, but the board committed to adding one grade level every year to that, so it's just a continuation of that expansion to get them up to a full contingent with their elementary.
Okay, but there's also a building. There's a cost for
There is,
that, so it's more than just the grade levels, so.
it is.
There's an additional thing, so I just thought we would have some discussion or something
Yeah,
about
so
it.
we, and I'll let Neil talk about this, but he did negotiate that with them. It's based on the facilities cost we pay for other similar venues like the community centers.
Okay, and all of that is included in the proposed budget?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure it's not a initiative.
Is there anything else you want to weigh in on that?
No, you captured everything.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else on the draft agenda? Okay, is there any other matter to discuss anyone wants to bring up, ask, or comment on? Okay, we're very close to adjourning the meeting, and then we do have an executive session scheduled. And before we adjourn, without making her feel obliged, I'd like to invite Dr. Gibbs if she has any comments to make, since this is her first meeting with us all assembled this way. You don't have to, Doctor, but if you're interested in it, you're very welcome to comment or react to anything. Did I catch you off guard? I didn't mean to.
No worries.
Okay.
No worries. Just thank you. Thank you for the warm welcome this week. It's been great. Appreciative of the leadership team for pulling together this, again, I think, as Dr. Brenneman stated, robust plan for us to be able to move forward and think about not just this upcoming year, but for years to come. So I've been part of those conversations and will continue to be.
Thank you, Dr. Gibbs. And again, welcome officially from all of us. Okay, if there's nothing else for tonight's agenda, we'll bump this and go to executive session after a 5-minute break. Okay, this portion of the meeting's ended, and we'll go to executive session hopefully in 5 minutes. Thank you.